Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I've been promising to do this video for a day or two, and I actually had a subscriber actually request me to do it, even though I've already said I was going to do it. And here's his comment, basically wanting me to make a list of some of the really stupid and dangerous exercises that bodybuilders tend to do. So let me put on my +5 cap of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting for my gamer viewers, and let's see if we can answer this. Alright guys, I don't think I can even cover all of them, but I'm just going to cover some of the basic ones and explain a little bit about why these different exercises are dangerous. Alright, the first one that comes to mind is the guillotine press, or any variation of the bench press to where you're benching up above the nipple with the elbows raised up. And oftentimes it's done all the way up to the neck as the guillotine press. Now, this has been shown to have an amazing pectoral recruitment, but the problem is that you can recruit the pecs a dozen different ways without doing this particular exercise. And the thing is, when you flare your elbows out or you raise the bar line on any press above the nipple, and in fact you can create a bar line itself like an actual bar path with dumbbells. You can still tell where the bar would basically be, because it's not so much about where the bar is, but where your plane of motion is, where you're moving the weight through. When you flare the elbows at the bottom third of any exercise like that, and it's even worse if you try to stop short. That's a whole nother issue. I can maybe cover that one in a minute too. That just exacerbates it. But when you flare the elbows, you put the shoulder joints in an anatomically incorrect position. You put the rotator cuffs in a dangerous position. And doing it repeatedly that way can eventually damage your rotator cuffs. You damage a rotator cuff, it is going to hurt your ability to train your chest and your shoulders to some extent for the rest of your life. It's dangerous, it's stupid, and it's bodybuilder nonsense that has no place in a proper strength training or even hypertrophy program. Now, number 2 up right behind that is going to be stopping short of the chest, particularly with the elbows flared, because generally the guys who stop short of the chest, they all flare their elbows anyways. Stopping short of the chest without a mechanical object to stop you. This is why the board press was invented by powerlifters. Alright, this is why some of the top powerlifters in the world who need enormous bench presses use the board press to do partials with. And it's because if you continue to train a bench press that way and you use it too heavy of a weight for you to do through full range of motion, because that's usually the case. You'll see guys doing partials with 405 or something, but when you put 350 on the bar, they can't press it off their chest, but they'll stop 4 or 5 inches short of their chest with 405. Alright, the problem you have is that not only are you shortening the muscle a little bit, if you're training exclusively that way, you're losing all the strength through the bottom of the range of motion also. So you're creating a muscle that's a little tighter than it needs to be in terms of mobility, and because you only have about 15 degrees of carryover on strength on any exercise. What I mean is, when you train a muscle through a partial range of motion, which we all do on some exercises, I mean, there's always going to be a big exercise that only works one of the muscles halfway or 2/3 of the way. You don't get much strength carryover beyond about 15 degrees of movement on a muscle. So you're actually training yourself to only get stronger at the top, you're getting weaker at the bottom, while kind of shortening the muscle a little bit over time. So what happens when you can no longer stop the weight from coming down? You're now weaker through the bottom of the range of motion and created a slightly tighter muscle, and you're now using a weight that is way too heavy for you to press through the full range of motion. So what happens when it accidentally comes down and you can't stop it one day? When you hit failure and your spotter can't pull it up, can't grab it before it drops too low, you end up pulling muscles, tearing muscles. You end up tearing a pectoral. Alright, even worse, let's say you're flaring your elbows, because most guys, when they put the brakes on the exercise, if you watch them, to slow it down, they have to flare the elbows down to keep it from slowing down at the bottom and touching the chest. So on top of that, that elbow flare at the bottom can injure your shoulders. So what happens when you have 30 or 40 or 50 pounds too heavy for you to press normally, that now hits the bottom in that anatomically incorrect position for your rotator cuffs? Sometimes you snap a rotator cuff also, or instead of a pec. Either way, you've now caused a very serious major injury over some stupidity. You could have just done the exercise correctly and avoided all of that. Number 2 going to be what I just covered this morning. I kind of did a whole video on it, so I don't need to cover it here. You guys can watch it. I did it right before this one. Smith machine squats. Tends to lead to muscle imbalances that cause you to damage your knees over time. It also locks you into improper bar path. You have multiple major joints, the hips, the knees, who work through pretty much a full range of motion on an exercise, and you're locking them into an unnatural bar path in motion. And again, this is an exercise that's loading weight on your back and loading everything to where it's an unnatural motion and arc for you, because again, you fixed it into a straight line. It can, depending on which style you use, lead to back injuries. It can lead to knee injuries. One of the most stupid exercises ever invented. And I know a lot of guys will claim, again, well, it burns my quads or it does this or that. Go watch my other video. I explain to you why that will hurt you over time. You know, and people always come up with this stuff of, well, I feel the burn here. I feel a burn. Are you going to the gym to feel a burn? Because sometimes a burn that you're thinking of as muscle burn is actually tendon inflammation. Sometimes it's damage to cartilage. Sometimes you're actually damaging yourself with an exercise that you think is giving you a burn. And I'm going to give you another example in a minute. But I would say that I don't go to the gym and lift weights so that I can feel a burn. That's not my intended purpose. I go to the gym and lift weights, one, because I enjoy it. Number two, because there's health benefits. But mainly, you know what the goals are of my exercises and the way I do them? To gain strength and to gain muscle. To gain strength and to gain muscle. I'm not there to get a burn. So I've got a question, you know, what is it you guys think that you're doing by I feel a burn or pain? You're there to feel pain, or are you there to get results? There's this weird idea, this masochism in certain elements of the fitness and training world, that there's some enormous overlap with how much pain you feel in the burn or tearing or ripping shit and actually seeing results. There's no need to feel a burn necessarily to stimulate a muscle to get bigger and stronger. That just requires progressive overload. And sometimes the burn can be a good thing. Sometimes the burn or the pump that you're feeling can be a sign of deep metabolic fatigue. Metabolic fatigue can definitely increase muscle size and, of course, strength accordingly. But not every burn that you're feeling is metabolic fatigue. Sometimes it's actually injury happening over time, and that's what's making it hurt. The perfect example, the next one, the lateral raise with the pinky turned up. The pinky up and the thumb down. All right. The reason you feel a burn deep in your shoulder when you do that is because it's crushing the glenoid inside your shoulder joint. It's crushing the glenoid in your shoulder joint. It's compressing it, and if you do it too many times, it cracks and ruptures. And then you can't do side laterals at all. You may not even be able to overhead press. You might not even be able to bench press after that until you get it surgically repaired, if it can be repaired, or until hopefully it heals on its own. It could take 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. Who knows? So the reason that exercise burns deep in the shoulder is not muscular stimulation. It's damage to the internal part of the actual joint, to the glenoid specifically. You're crushing it with the pinky up. So it's very popular with bodybuilders, and a lot of them tell you to do that, to turn it like you're pouring out a tea kettle or something, when in reality all it is doing is injuring you. You'll actually get just as much shoulder stimulation if you keep the thumbs up slightly, but without damaging the joint over time. So again, another stupid, dangerous, and useless exercise or exercise variation that's popular with bodybuilders because of the burn, but the burn is not due to muscle activation. The burn is due to damage to your body. All right, any sort of tricep exercise where you keep the elbows pulled in while you do the press, the extension. The elbows in, anytime you have the elbows in tight on a tricep exercise, you actually are inflaming. It puts basically a deep stretch on the tendon itself, these tendons here and the lateral and medial head. So by doing them that way, you're actually causing over time micro tearing and inflammation in your connective tissue. So all these guys you see who do elbows in on all their tricep exercises, who then complain that their elbows hurt sometimes, that their tendons hurt in their triceps, and they start wearing wraps around their elbows and stuff when they do various exercises, even their pressing, because it hurts. That's what's causing it. It's that elbows in position that is causing inflammation in the connective tissue. Inflammation in the connective tissue around the elbow. It's actually injuring you. And then they need, in order to make it hurt less, because they're thinking, well, they need it for their bench press. Like, every time I press heavy, my elbows hurt. Well, so then they're wrapping everything up so that it hurts less when they press, but the reality is it's not the press that's hurting them, it's the way they're doing their tricep exercises. Another big one, touch and go deadlifts. Where you take the deadlift and you bounce it off the floor. You let it hit the floor and just pull it back up, or you bounce it. Now, a lot of guys are going to say, but I see George Lehman doing that all the time. I see Jeff Seid doing that. If you do anything Jeff Seid does, you're an idiot. That guy is literally a fucking moron. I know he's entertaining and I know he's aesthetic to a lot of you guys, but that doesn't mean that he's someone intelligent or has anything worthwhile to say. It's actually scary, the things that come out of his mouth. He is definitely below average intelligence, and he really doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just very genetically gifted. But a lot of his training is dangerous and stupid. Again, goes to show you that without knowledge, genetics and drugs can carry you a long way. Now, the bouncing the deadlift at the bottom, same thing. You guys will say George Lehman, be like, yeah, but George Lehman is a genetic freak and seems to be immune to injuries to some extent and can do things that other people don't seem to be able to get away with, meaning his structure and his bone structure and his connective tissue is so thick and massive because the guy has an enormous thick frame. When people talk about big bone, now that is a dude who is big boned. But that also means with all those big heavy bones everywhere, he's also got very, very thick, genetically thick and strong connective tissue. He can get away with things that mere mortals, guys with more average genetics, probably can't get away with. And it doesn't mean that he won't eventually get injured doing it. But the fact of the matter is, the actual bounce at the bottom of the deadlift like those guys do, where they tap it and touch and go instead of letting the weight come down, doing a full reset, letting it set on the floor for a second, can actually injure your lower back. That is one of the biggest ways that guys injure their lower back on the deadlift, is by bouncing it off the bottom. Not by letting it drop fast. That won't actually hurt you unless you bounce at the bottom with it. Full reset is much, much safer. Touch and go or bouncing on the deadlift is dangerous. It will hurt you. Eventually. Not saying it's going to happen immediately. It might take you years for it to happen, but when you finally like rupture or slip a disc in your back, deadlifting, you're going to know why. It has nothing to do with the fact that the deadlift is dangerous. Performing the deadlift incorrectly is dangerous. It's called a deadlift. That means you pull it from a dead stop. If you're bouncing out of the bottom, it's not a deadlift. All right, I wonder if I can think of any others immediately at the top of my head. Oh, really, really wide grip lat pull downs, or really, really wide grip chin ups. Usually, honestly, those exercises not only have a longer range of motion, but they're easier on your shoulder joints, which you grip them narrow or even down to shoulder width. Really, really wide pull-ups, which is impressive. You're impressive if you can do ultra-wide pull-ups with your body weight. That's not an unimpressive feat of strength. But just like with the lat pull-down, it's actually dangerous. It puts stress on your shoulder joints to grip them out really, really wide the way a lot of guys do instead of in narrower. And in fact, I really like the for lat pull downs. I really prefer if people use the hammer grip style with the pronated grip with the palms facing each other. Those are the easiest on the shoulder joints. And you know what? That really wide grip puts the shoulders at risk, but gives you no additional back development over the narrower grip. It has no advantage for adding more thickness, for adding more width, any of that. That's a myth. It doesn't actually make your back any wider than the narrower grip. But what it does do is put additional stress on your shoulders that can injure you over time. So there we go, guys. There's a little short list of some of the most common stupid and dangerous exercises or exercise variations that bodybuilders do. It would be in your best interest, if you're concerned about injury and actually just making continual progress and gains without hurting yourself, if you completely avoid all of those. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.